Look at this, my friends. Lamar Jackson's ankle didn't just change Baltimore's injury report this week, it shifted the entire mood around the AFC North race. And if you watched the Ravens practice notes roll out, you already know this wasn't one of those routine veteran rest days or a precautionary tweak. This was a new injury, one that appeared in the middle of the week, one serious enough to keep him completely off the field on Thursday, and one that instantly forces the Steelers to reevaluate everything about Sunday's matchup. Jackson was practicing on Wednesday, but he didn't speak to the media afterward as he normally does. That alone raised eyebrows. Now we know why. He was dealing with an ankle issue that resurfaced during that session, severe enough that he needed treatment instead of interviews. And considering how banged up he's been all year, the hamstring, the foot issues, the earlier ankle concerns, this isn't nothing. He hasn't looked like his usual self, hasn't moved with the same burst, has taken more sacks than normal, and his pressure-to-sack ratio has ballooned to a number completely out of character for him. And with Pittsburgh's pass rush being exactly the kind that punishes even the slightest hesitation, you can practically feel the tension building in Baltimore over whether their MVP quarterback will be mobile enough, healthy enough, or even available at all. But let's be real with each other here. Lamar Jackson isn't the real axis of this matchup, no matter how dramatic his status becomes. The man who broke the Steelers' will twice last season is Derrick Henry. 2 meetings, nearly 170 rushing yards per game, more than 7 yards per carry, and a level of physical dominance that simply cannot happen again if Pittsburgh expects to keep pace in this division. Henry controlled those games. He dictated the pace, the matchups, the defensive reactions, everything. And when he's rolling, it doesn't matter who Baltimore has at quarterback. Whether it's Lamar or Snoop Huntley, the script becomes the same. Henry eats clock, punishes defenders, softens the box, and makes the Ravens' offense impossible to get off the field. Tara Austin and the Steelers cannot show up with the same plan they had last year or even the same plan they had last week against James Cook, because with Henry, missed fits and soft edges don't lead to first downs. They lead to soul-crushing, drive-killing, morale-destroying runs that flip an entire game. The Steelers' defensive front needs its best outing of the year. If they make Baltimore throw, Pittsburgh has a real shot. If they don't, the outcome becomes predictable in the worst way. And that pressure becomes even heavier when you look at Pittsburgh's own injury situations. TJ Watt missing Wednesday's practice had the whole fan base holding its breath, but his full participation Thursday erased that panic. Patrick Queen is banged up with a glut injury and was limited, but the progress is encouraging. James Pierre is trending upward in concussion protocol after a full session. Joey Porter Jr. suddenly appeared with an elbow issue, which complicates things against a physical Ravens offense, and Kyle Duggar's hand injury kept him out entirely, a huge concern given how critical he is to the run fits and safety rotations. And then there's Jalen Ramsey, 2 straight vet rest days at a point in the season when bodies don't bounce back quickly. It isn't a reason to panic yet, but it's something you can't ignore either. These pieces matter, especially in a divisional game where one injury can shift the entire matchup. And then, in one of the strangest plot twists to resurface this week, Patrick Queen dropped the bombshell about last year's playoff game, that he and Minkah Fitzpatrick were dealing with food poisoning the night before facing Baltimore. Not a minor stomach bug, not a didn't feel great situation, full-blown vomiting, hours in the shower, 3-4 bags before the game, 1 at halftime, freezing, shaking, barely able to move. When you hear him describe knowing what play was coming and still not being able to react, it makes the whole thing feel like a completely different game in hindsight. Add Minkah feeling the early symptoms too, and suddenly those missed tackles and late reactions make a lot more sense. Derrick Henry ran through them like they weren't even on the field. Now we know why. And Queen even joked that maybe they should avoid restaurants in Baltimore on Saturday night this time around. This week feels different, though. The stakes are higher, the margin for error is smaller, and the questions hanging over this matchup, Lamar's ankle, Henry's dominance, the Steelers' injury concerns, the defense's ability to respond after last week, all crashed together into a game that could tilt the entire AFC North in the final stretch of the season. So let me throw it back to you as we close out the first part of this report. With everything we know right now, Lamar's injury, Henry's history, Pittsburgh's injury updates, and the sheer weight of this matchup, do you think the Steelers are finally ready to flip the script this time? And that script absolutely needs flipping, because the second half of this story isn't about what Baltimore brings, it's about what Pittsburgh must become in a moment where their season is hanging in the balance. The Steelers don't just need a plan for Derrick Henry, they need a response to an entire style of football that bullied them twice last season and exposed every weakness in their defensive discipline. And this week, with the Ravens potentially rolling in without a fully healthy Lamar Jackson, the opportunity is sitting right there, but only if Pittsburgh actually takes advantage of it. The defensive front has been under fire all week after the collapse against James Cook, and rightfully so. Gaps weren't filled, tackles weren't finished, and the interior was washed out far too easily. That can't happen again, not against a back whose calling card is punishing hesitation. This is the type of game where Cam Hayward's leadership becomes more valuable than ever, where Keanu Benton has to anchor like a seasoned veteran, and where the linebackers must trust their reads and strike with conviction. Patrick Queen might not be at 100%, but he's still expected to play, and after everything he went through last year in Baltimore, you know he's not going to let this become a repeat performance. His voice matters, his urgency matters, and his experience in this rivalry matters even more. And if Minkah Fitzpatrick is on the field without the literal food poisoning that crippled him in the playoffs, that alone is a massive upgrade from those disastrous outings last year. On the other side of the ball, this is the exact type of game where Pittsburgh's offense needs to help the defense instead of hanging it out to dry. Sustained drives, efficient passing, smart decisions, and above all else, refusing to give Baltimore short fields. The Ravens' defense thrives when opponents get desperate. Pittsburgh has to flip that script and dictate the tempo. There's no room for the offense to go 3 and out repeatedly, not when every possession affects how many times Henry touches the ball. And this is where the future becomes part of the conversation, because whether fans want to admit it or not, the Steelers are staring straight at another offseason of quarterback questions, roster decisions, and the inevitable debate about where this team goes next. That's why the mock draft from Dane Bugler hit Pittsburgh fans harder than normal. When a highly respected analyst projects Ty Simpson, the #1 quarterback on his board and the #2 overall prospect, to fall right into the Steelers' lap in the teens, it forces you to examine long-term decisions even in the middle of a division race. Bugler sees Simpson as a pro-ready passer with NFL-level processing, command, and poise in a system that already mirrors what Arthur Smith wants to run. And when a quarterback has that kind of mental speed, that kind of calm under pressure, and that kind of tape against SEC defenses, it's impossible not to at least imagine what a post-2025 Steelers offense could look like with a franchise-level talent under center. Simpson's lack of starts is a concern, sure, but his upside is undeniable. His traits fit the Steelers' identity, and his game translates in a way the other quarterbacks, Dante Moore and Fernando Mendoza, might need a year to catch up to simply because of the college systems they play in. That doesn't make those guys less talented. It just means Simpson is more plug-and-play than both. But that's a conversation for later this season. Right now, the pressure is on the coaching staff to get every detail right. Arthur Smith, Terrell Austin, Mike Tomlin, they all know this game carries weight beyond the standings. Containing Derrick Henry would send a message that the Steelers' defense has corrected the failures that haunted it. Pressuring a limited or compromised Lamar Jackson would show that the pass rush can still take over games when it matters most. And competing until the final whistle in Baltimore, regardless of the Ravens' health status, would prove that Pittsburgh still has the resilience, toughness, and identity expected of the black and gold. Now the question shifts again to the heart of Steelers Nation. You've heard every injury update, every matchup concern, every storyline circulating around this rivalry, and every possibility tied to the team's future. With all of that in mind, what do you think happens on Sunday? Can the Steelers rise to the challenge, punch back, and take control of their season? And this is where everything converges for Pittsburgh. The injuries, the matchups, the pressure, the future, all colliding in a game that demands clarity from a team that's been searching for it all season. The Steelers know exactly what the Ravens want to do if Lamar Jackson isn't fully mobile, and even more so if he's not playing at all. Baltimore will lean on Derrick Henry until someone forces them to stop, and that's where the real identity test begins. Because last season, in both matchups, the Steelers didn't make Baltimore adjust, they let Baltimore dictate every snap. Henry didn't just run well, he controlled the entire physical tone of those games. So if Pittsburgh truly wants to rewrite the narrative, this is the moment to do it. The urgency around this matchup is also shaped by the fact that the defense can't afford another outing like the one against James Cook. Too many missed tackles, too many slow reads, too many moments where the interior got washed down and the linebackers arrived a step too late. When you face Derrick Henry, those mistakes become catastrophic. If you're late filling a gap by half a second, he's already through it. If you're not squared up when he lowers his shoulder, you're going backwards. And if you allow him to get to the second level, you're giving up chunk plays that flip field position instantly. That's why this week's preparation matters as much as the game itself. Communication, gap discipline, balance, leverage, everything must be perfect or close to it. And then there's the storyline that resurfaced out of nowhere. Patrick Queen revealing how he and Minkah Fitzpatrick battled food poisoning before last year's playoff game in Baltimore. That revelation reframes everything about those matchups. Queen described vomiting, hours in the shower, multiple 4 bags, freezing, shaking, barely able to function. It's not an excuse, it's context. And now that the truth is out, it becomes a reminder of how much healthier and more prepared this defense needs to be for whatever Baltimore plans to throw at them this time around. Queen and Minka at full strength fundamentally change how the middle of the field operates. They close passing lanes faster. They fit the run more aggressively. They communicate far more effectively. And against a team like the Ravens, that margin of improvement is massive. But while all eyes are focused on the immediate battle in Baltimore, the long-term tension continues to build beneath the surface, especially with Dane Bugler projecting Ty Simpson to the Steelers in the draft. A pro-ready quarterback in a system that translates cleanly to the NFL, a passer who processes at a veteran level, someone who would fit perfectly in Arthur Smith's offense if he remains in Pittsburgh. Bugler ranking Simpson as his number 1 quarterback and number 2 overall prospect isn't casual praise, it's a statement about how refined Simpson's game already is. And when the Steelers face another offseason full of quarterback questions, this projection forces everyone inside the organization to think ahead even while trying to salvage the current season. Still, none of those long-term discussions will matter if Pittsburgh doesn't show signs of life right now. This Ravens game isn't just another AFC North matchup. It's a measuring stick. It's a chance to prove that last week's collapse isn't who they are. It's a chance to prove that the defensive issues can be corrected. It's a chance to show that even with their own injuries, even with the season on the brink, this team can still fight, respond, and carry themselves with the toughness that defines the black and gold. Every player knows what's at stake. Every coach feels the weight of this moment, and every fan watching understands that this game could either reignite the season or send Pittsburgh deeper into the uncertainty that's hovered over them for weeks. This is the kind of matchup where legacies inside a season are shaped, where units redeem themselves, where leaders emerge, where a team either rises or folds. If you're part of Steelers Nation, this is the week you watch every snap with your heart pounding, because the implications stretch far beyond the final score. And when you zoom in even further on everything swirling inside this matchup, you realize just how thin the margins really are for Pittsburgh. Every storyline that came out of that injury report, Lamar Jackson's ankle flare-up, the uncertainty around Kyle Duggar's hand, Joey Porter Jr.'s elbow, Patrick Queen's glut, even Jalen Ramsey needing back-to-back veteran rest days, all of it stacks into a game where every snap gains extra weight. And that's the part that makes this week feel so different. The Steelers aren't dealing with vague injuries or long-term rehabs. These are game-day decisions that directly shape strategy, matchups, and the type of football this defense can play. Because think about it, if Duggar is out, and the Steelers have to lean more heavily on Jabril Peppers next to Jalen Ramsey, that completely shifts how Pittsburgh disguises coverages, rotates safeties, and fits the run. Duggar is a downhill force, a physical presence who attacks gaps aggressively. And if he's unavailable, that affects how confident the team can be in loading the box against Derrick Henry. On top of that, Joey Porter Jr. dealing with an elbow injury is a bigger storyline than some might realize. His length and physicality at the line are core to his success. If his ability to jam, punch, or extend is even slightly limited, that changes how the Steelers can match up on the outside. These aren't small details, they're structural pieces of the game plan. And then there's the Ravens side of things. Lamar Jackson missing practice with an ankle injury gained national attention, but the nuance is hidden in what we've watched all season. He hasn't moved the same since the hamstring injury. The foot issues lingered. The earlier ankle tweak already slowed him. And now this setback lands right before a divisional showdown. It's not just about whether he plays, it's about how functional he can be. Can he escape pressure? Can he maneuver the pocket? Can he extend plays without risking aggravation? Those questions matter because Pittsburgh's pass rush is uniquely built to punish limited mobility. Lamar's pressure-to-sack ratio exploding this season is the kind of statistical red flag that defensive coordinators circle with a thick marker. That's why the Steelers' front, Hayward, Benton, and the rotation has a chance to change the entire trajectory of this game. If Lamar is limited and if Pittsburgh forces him to hold the ball even a fraction longer, this is a matchup where sacks can come in bunches. But again, all of that collapses if Derrick Henry starts rolling downhill. That's the paradox of playing Baltimore. You can neutralize Lamar completely and still lose if Henry dictates the game. And the memories of last season, the 170 yards per game, the 7 yards per carry, the total physical takeover, hang over this matchup like a warning siren. The Steelers know why it happened. They know what was missing. They know that the middle of the defense wasn't healthy, wasn't coordinated, wasn't physically able to withstand what Baltimore threw at them. Patrick Queen's confession about the food poisoning, Minkah Fitzpatrick's quiet admission that he felt it too, those aren't excuses. They're pieces of the puzzle that were hidden until now. And hearing Queen describe getting 3-4 bags, shaking in the shower, barely able to function, and still trying to play linebacker in a playoff game puts the entire performance into a new frame. It's a reminder of how brutal this rivalry is and how thin the line can be between dominance and disaster. This time, Queen and Mink are headed into Baltimore without that burden. This time, the Steelers are healthier, not perfect, but healthier, and that alone makes this matchup fundamentally different than last season's meetings. Meanwhile, the long-term picture refuses to quiet down. The Ty Simpson conversation keeps resurfacing because the projection is too intriguing to ignore. A quarterback ranked as the #1 passer in the draft class, the #2 prospect overall, falling directly into Pittsburgh's range without a trade-up. That's the type of scenario that can reshape a franchise. Simpson's processing, poise, command, and fit within a pro-style structure are exactly what NFL teams prioritize. And Bugler making that projection so confidently sends a message. If the Steelers want a quarterback who can play early, adapt quickly, and handle NFL structure, Simpson might be the cleanest fit in the entire class. But the irony is that the Steelers don't have the luxury of thinking about April right now. Not with this game ahead of them. Not with the AFC North still within reach. And not with a Ravens team that will punish every mistake if Pittsburgh isn't locked in from the first snap. This is the type of matchup that tests confidence, identity, and resolve. This is where leaders speak louder, where preparation meets reality, where every unit either meets the moment or gets exposed. And the truth is simple. If the Steelers want to keep this season alive, if they want to silence the outside noise, if they want to flip the script that Baltimore wrote over them last year, they have to deliver a response that matches the stakes. Nothing less will be enough. And the closer we get to kickoff, the clearer it becomes that this matchup isn't just a test of talent, it's a test of emotional resilience, competitive maturity, and the ability to correct mistakes that have lingered for far too long. The Steelers have spent an entire week replaying the failures from last season's meetings with Baltimore, and they know exactly where things fell apart. Open lanes, slow support, late angles, and a defensive interior that couldn't anchor against Derrick Henry's power. This week has been about confronting those issues head-on, not pretending they were flukes, not blaming injuries, not brushing them off, but addressing them with the urgency of a team that understands the consequences of getting it wrong again. There's a sense inside the building that this game will reveal more about the Steelers' trajectory than any previous one this year. Mike Tomlin has always preached physicality and discipline, but this is the kind of opponent that exposes cracks instantly. You can't fake toughness against Baltimore. You can't hide poor gap integrity. You can't bluff your way through tackling Derrick Henry. And you sure can't survive long defensive drives if your offense fails to sustain possessions. That's why the emphasis throughout the week hasn't only been on stopping the run, it's been on playing complementary football. If the offense can't give the defense breathers, Henry's workload becomes heavier, his impact becomes greater, and the game becomes the exact script Baltimore wants. What makes this matchup even more